So, are the cases analogous? That's the question that we should ask. Is what the gentleman traveler should think, somebody designed this, just what you should think, somebody designed this squirrel? Well, Paley anticipated some things that objectors would say, some disanalogies that objectors would point out between the gentleman traveler case and the squirrel case. So, first disanalogy that the objector might point out. Well, wait a sec. The gentleman traveler knows that watches are the kind of thing that tend to be designed by people. I mean, the gentleman traveler has presumably been to a watch shop and talked with the watchmaker, if he's any kind of gentleman, and just knows in the background that people design watches. We haven't yet been confronted with a god who has a squirrel shop where he says, here are all the squirrels that I've designed. No such thing exists. Okay, so that is a disanalogy between the cases. Paley says it doesn't matter. Imagine that the gentleman traveler has never seen a watch before. Imagine that the gentleman traveler is just kind of, I don't know, he's been living in great isolation from that world. Or, if you like, Paley didn't put it like this, but we can, imagine that the gentleman traveler comes upon an iPhone, something that is far beyond his ken. Nonetheless, if he looks at that iPhone and he kind of inspects it, bashes it a bit, it's actually hard to take apart an iPhone, but perhaps he has a chisel, and he looks and he kind of investigates that glass, and he looks at the way all the intricate circuits are put together, and he notices, if he has some understanding of how it works, he notices of how all the different parts contribute to the functioning of the whole. He would, Paley would say, be perfectly rational to think, yeah, this was a clever designer. Gosh, what extraordinary designers there are. I never even imagined there would be designers like this, designers who could make things as beautiful and intricate and wonderful as this. And so the fact that we haven't yet been confronted with a squirrel designer, squirrels aren't the kinds of things that are sold in shops, shouldn't matter, says Paley. Second disanalogy between the watch case and the squirrel case. Look, the gentleman traveler can see that the watch tells time. And he knows that people have an interest in telling time. It's a very useful thing to be able to tell the time. So he has some grounds for thinking somebody probably designed this, because the function of the watch is a function that serves human interests. Squirrels don't really have this feature. I mean, squirrels, the life of the squirrel doesn't really serve any obvious human interest. I don't know of many domesticated squirrels that are of much use to us. So we don't have these grounds for thinking that somebody designed a squirrel. But again, Paley says this doesn't matter. Suppose the gentleman traveler saw the watch and had no idea of its purpose. Again, if the gentleman traveler were confronted with an iPhone, that might be quite realistic. Would really have no idea what these bright lights were doing. No idea of, what's this game? Fruit Ninja. I mean, he has no idea. Why is anybody doing that? He doesn't think it serves any human interest. Nonetheless, if he were to observe the iPhone running Fruit Ninja, he would rightfully think, gosh, this was a cleverly designed thing. Okay, so again, that disanalogy between the cases doesn't matter. Disanalogy 3. A watch doesn't make baby watches. So the gentleman traveler, upon coming upon this watch, is going to see that it's not the kind of thing that got made by other watches. Whereas we, when we look at the squirrel, can say, oh, well, this squirrel came from a mommy and daddy squirrel. That's a disanalogy between the cases. Does it explain why it's rational for the gentleman traveler to think somebody made this, but it's not rational for us to think somebody made this squirrel? Well, again, Paley says no. And here we're getting into slightly more controversial territory. But his idea was this. Look, if the gentleman traveler saw this watch and observed that in addition to its time-telling mechanisms, it had this extraordinary way of generating copies of itself. And if the gentleman traveller deduced, this watch was itself generated by such a mechanism. This watch had parent watches, in a sense. These watches, this is just one of a chain of self-replicating watches. Then, says Paley, the gentleman traveller should think, not, gosh, nobody designed this. The gentleman traveller should think, what a person, what an amazing ingenuity. This just casts yet more extraordinary, beautiful light on the ingenuity, cleverness, brilliance of the designer. And likewise, says Paley, when we observe that squirrel babies have squirrel mommies and daddies, we should not think, oh, that means that nobody designed the squirrel. We should think, rather, that the person who designed the squirrel was very resourceful, very ingenious indeed. That is the basics of what Paley said. It's not really what we want yet, which is a rigorous proof in the form of an argument for the existence of God. And so our next job is to turn it into one, or try to.